30 days after the ratification of instruments have been exchanged, which is 10 July 2021. The applicable legal instruments, it is common cause that South Africa has persons of interest who frequent the UAE and are believed to be in the UAE. It is worth mentioning that our request for mutual legal assistance to the UAE to date was not prohibited by the fact that there was no treaties in force between the two states. All our requests were sent in terms of Article 44 of the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption, the convention. South Africa ratified the convention in 2004, and it came into force in 2005. The UAE also ratified the convention in 2006. We state this to point out that this was the applicable legal instruments under which we expected cooperation from the UAE. This convention offers the same amount of framework for cooperation on criminal matters. The convention is premised on the fact that all parties to it agree to place particular focus on and give priority to the fight against the worldwide conditions that pose severe threats to sustainable development of our people. Among these conditions are organized crime and corruption. In terms of this convention, all state parties who are party affirmed that they are concerned about the serious problems and threat posed by corruption to the stability and security of their societies, undermining of institutions and values of democracy, ethical values and justice, and jeopardizing sustainable development and the rule of law. Moreover, such states affirmed that they are convinced that corruption is no longer a local matter, but a transnational phenomenon that affects all societies and economies, making international cooperation to prevent and control it essential. Irrespective of the fact that both South Africa and the UAE ratified this convention, regrettable, we have to date not experienced the level of appreciation and cooperation which is required in terms of the convention in the fight against corruption from the UAE. However, we will continue to pursue our counterparts through diplomatic channels in order to reach the desired levels of cooperation, to enable our law enforcement agencies to bring to justice persons of interest of any investigation they are pursuing. It is our hope that even though we could not get the assistance required through the UN Convention, the ratification of the two treaties symbolizes a change of course and cooperation, a change of heart, and we are hopeful that a new dawn has begun. In our bilateral meeting, the ambassador of the UAE reaffirmed that our treaties are only held together by cooperation. We have reassured our counterparts that whilst we welcome the ratification of the treaties, our expectations are yet to be fulfilled, and this is a critical component of the relations. We remain committed to maintain bilateral relations with the UAE. These have spanned for over a period of 27 years. And it is in the interest of both parties that these treaties are implemented and cooperation is improved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.
Oh.
Thank you, Minister. Colleagues, we will then take questions on our GCIS WhatsApp group. In the meantime, Director General and Advocate Batoy, do you have any remarks whilst we wait for the questions to stream in from our GCIS WhatsApp group?
Thank you, Crispin. You should have reminded me I'll be getting this opportunity. But no, thank you very much, Crispin. Thank you, Minister. I think perhaps what I can say is that in as much as the UAE has ratified the treaty, there was nothing up until this point that precluded cooperation between the two countries. And so, as I expressed to the ambassador yesterday, we will only accept that there is full cooperation when we receive the necessary information that we have been requesting now for over 3 years without success. So, as I say, it is a positive development, but we will only know that this is making a difference once our request for mutual legal assistance are fully executed by the UAE, and we get the necessary cooperation, including evidence from the UAE. Thank you, Crispin.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The minister's statement has covered all the salient and critical points that had to be presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG and NDPP. We do have a question from Angelo Coppola, Minister for CGTN, and he's asking, when can we expect a response from the UAE on the Guptas and what happens next? Maybe we can start with the NDPP and then the DG. If there's an answer, then the Minister can come.
Thank you, Crispin. Well, that's a difficult question to answer. We've been waiting for a response, as I said, for over 3 years. The treaty doesn't really change anything because there's always been sufficient legitimate ways in which we could have cooperated. But in the spirit of cooperation, as exhibited yesterday, I certainly hope that, as the Minister said in his speech, there will be a change and that there will be a positive response to our requests as soon as possible. But just to explain as well that, the extradition process, and firstly, let me explain that the one thing is we've been waiting for evidence from the UAE, which hopefully we will get very soon, given that that is outstanding for over 3 years. But with regard to extradition, perhaps to be clear that, there are processes, and once accused persons or suspects are arrested in any country, there are legal processes in that country that take place. And then at the end of those legal processes, it becomes a political issue in that the executive then decides whether to surrender the person to the requesting country or not. And that very much depends on political will. So if there was any thought that, those that we are seeking to face justice in South Africa would be on the next plane to South Africa, I think to be clear that that is certainly a process that will take some time after the arrest of outstanding suspects, wherever they may be in the world. Thank you.
Hi, Chris. I think that's sufficiently covered.
Thank you, Director General. We have then 2 more questions. How confident are you? This is from ENCA, Jody Jacobs. How confident are you that the UAE will cooperate, since SA itself did not cooperate in the al-Bashir matter? Then we have a question from Kaylin Pillay from Independent Media. What are the timelines to extradite the Guptas now that the treaties have been ratified? I think we've answered that question. The second question is, how has the Gupta saga impacted on relations between the UAE and RSA? Over to you, Minister.
Yeah, no, thank you. Firstly, is that we do expect cooperation going forward, because it's a commitment we have received from the ambassador yesterday when we exchanged the instruments with the ambassador of the UAE, who committed that he is going to engage his country and counterparts to cooperate with all our requests and to respond to all the requests that we have sent to the UAE. And on the basis of that, we hope that this ratification and the exchange of instruments signals that a new dawn or the beginning of a cooperation that is going to happen as we move forward. And it is, from our context, this matter has nothing to do with the al-Bashir matter. And the second one, with regards to the timelines, I think we have the NDPP has already spoken to that we really can't put timelines. And sometimes extradition by their nature becomes a protracted legal processes. And it starts firstly with their own judicial processes, which will then move to the level of the executive when everything under the courts has been cleared, where the executive will have to make a decision whether to extradite or not in terms of their laws, whether they're extraditable. So we cannot really put the exact timelines to say by tomorrow morning this is going to happen. But what we can say to South Africans is that we should not expect that the people of interest will board the first plane to South Africa tomorrow morning. So there will still be legal processes that have to be followed. And we expect that there will be maximum cooperation from the UAE and from ourselves to ensure that we comply with the rule of law.
Thank you, Minister. Then the next question is from Peter Fabrikas from the Daily Maverick and the Institute for Security Studies. What is the information which the South African government requires from the UAE? NDPP, I think that would be a question that would be appropriate for you to expand on, if possible.
Sorry, I was not unmuted. Briefly, it relates to financial evidence. Bank records, bank statements.
Thank you, NDPP. That was brief, straight to the point. I see there are no other questions streaming in. But I think of also particular interest is now that a red notice has been issued, NDPP, what does that entail? Can we take South Africans into confidence on those things? And also, Minister, I'm sure you can elaborate on that process as well.
Yes, what this means is that, we will be able to receive the assistance of Interpol in whichever country they have a presence, to work with the authorities in that particular country to effect the arrests of the outstanding suspects. And so that is essentially what it means. And hopefully once that happens, as the Minister and I have both explained, there will be legal processes with regard to the extradition of those persons. So to put it very, very simply, that is essentially what it means. It means Interpol working with law enforcement, Interpol working to assist in tracing these persons, and then once whereabouts have been established, to work with the local authorities to effect arrests.
Director General, is there a point that you would like to address as well?
There was a question about the impact this matter has on the relationship between South Africa and the UAE. So I wanted to state that the relationship between the two countries remain cordial and healthy and strong. It is in the nature of diplomacy that there will be difficult moments in relationship between states. We continue ourselves to receive requests for mutual legal assistance from the UAE. And we are duty bound by law and international law to continue to assist as we expect them to do. So no matter how difficult at points the relationship may be, the diplomatic relationship has to continue within that particular understanding. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. I think then that concludes the end of this press conference. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Crispin?
Yes. Oh, I see a question from Mahlase Mokhale.
Thank you.
And just this is the last question. It really came in last minute. Mahlase Mokhale from Newsroom Africa is asking, are there other people outside of the Guptas who can be affected by extradition? I don't know, it's a very wide question, but maybe we can attempt to just clarify what it entails, Minister, generally, what extradition seeks to achieve.
Yes, the agreement entails the two countries are narrowing their cooperation agreement between them as at a bilateral level. While we have explained the United Nations Convention, but this just strengthened the hands of the two countries at the level of bilateral cooperation. And it also means that whatever information that we require from the United Arab Emirates will now henceforth be governed and be followed through the cooperation of the UN Convention, but also through this bilateral agreement, when we will therefore be duty bound to comply with the two agreements in terms of the mutual legal assistance and also in terms of the extradition agreements. As the DG has said, it will obviously affect everyone from both countries, whether the UAE wants information from our side or they want us to help them with extraditing anyone in South Africa. It will affect that process. Or if ourselves we want to extradite or we want information in the UAE, it will affect any process that relates to the request that we'll be making against any individual or any person who might be in the UAE or information that we might be requiring in the UAE. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister and Chris.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chris.
The recording has stopped.